Debbie, I'm super excited that you're joining us for this conversation. You know, the Core Design Club community are big fans of yours, and I'm excited to dive into some of the details of the report with you and really better understand from your perspective, you know, how can we as an industry continue to move the needle for the LGBT community in design?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here and joining you. It's a real honor, and I'm so excited about all the work that you're doing, and am so thrilled that an organization like yours exists now.
Yeah, I mean, over the span of your career, you know, you've interviewed hundreds of creatives and several dozens of them being LGBTQ designers and people in the community. Before Queer Design Club existed, before online spaces for community existed, what did finding queer design community in the design industry look like?
Well, there really wasn't any. There's Lesbians Who Tech that Leanne Pitchford started, and that's something that I have been a part of since 2015. And for a short time, AIGA was doing something that they called AIG Gay, and that was short lived. Um, but there really hasn't been anything. So kudos to you for doing that and for creating this super important space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the reasons why we created this space, right? Because back in 2019, when John and I were exploring founding something, we were looking, you know, Googling queer design stuff on Google and nothing would come up really. Like, you know,
Mm-mm.
very splattered things. We knew people in the industry that were working and we knew the people were out there, but there didn't seem to be any central place for them to come together. And, you know, one of the things that we found when we were starting this community was we were asking the question like, who is the community? How are we going to find them? What do we know about them? And those curious questions led to the founding of the Core Design Count, which is our field-wide survey of LGBTQ people to really understand the experiences of people in the industry. So in your time in your career, you know, how have you observed or seen any noticeable change in the attitude towards LGBTQ people in design, especially queer people in design? Especially queer people of color in design and in leadership roles.
Well, I grew up really in the 70s. I was born in the 60s, but I was 10 years old in 1971. And at the time, the world thought of the LGBT community as misfits. It was in many places against the law to have an open gay relationship. And I remember being a kid, and the only reason I can say I actually remember this is because it's something I wrote in my diary, that I had been introduced to somebody who was gay. And I wrote in my journal, I don't understand why people don't like gay people. Gay people seem great. Not knowing at that time in my life, I must have been, 11, 12 years old,
Right.
that I would ultimately one day come out. I mean, I do have to say, to be perfectly honest, my first real kiss was with a girl, Patty Goldrich, in third grade on Staten Island. Just saying.
Shout
And
out to
then
Patty wherever you are
Patty,
now.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But there was so much homophobia in our society through the 70s and then into the 80s with AIDS, that even when in the early 80s I began to suspect that I might be gay, that the idea of coming out was so terrifying to me that I didn't. And I didn't have the guts or the courage, and I'm really ashamed of that now. First of all the time lost living a life that was only sort of partially true, and then also just that amount of fear. I lived in the West Village. I was sort of front and center to what was happening in the gay community, and I lost friends that were gay to AIDS, but also had a lot of my own homophobia because I was so afraid that people would judge me for being gay. that
Hmm.
judgment was more horrifying to me than actually the idea of not coming out and not living a full life. And that took a
Yeah.
long time to overcome. That took a long time to overcome.
Yeah. And in terms of the design industry, in during that time that you're mentioning in the 80s in the West Village, that was also a very prolific time for artists, and
Yeah.
a lot of the prolific artists in the at that time were queer people, right? And LGBTQ people. And design has always been a field that's adjacent to art in the way that it's naturally attractive to queer people, because it's a form of self expression. It's a way to really explore your identity, explore problems in an alternative way of solving them. What have you observed between the time in the 80s and even the 90s and the way we embrace pride today? What are some of the differences there that you may observe in either in the industry or just in general?
Well, certainly I understand what pride means. And it wasn't until my first Pride parade in 2013, I came out in 2012. And in my first Pride parade, my cousin Eileen snuck me and my then partner, Maria Popova, into the parade. We actually snuck
Hmm.
in. And I was wearing the sort of classic Ellen DeGeneres t shirt that said, "Yep, I'm gay." It was not with Ellen on it, but that's what she said on the cover of
Yeah.
Time magazine when she came out. And I understood in that moment what it felt to be proud of who I was. And that's when I understood what pride meant. It's about feeling entitled to be who you are and proud of that. And what I can say about so many young people now, and this is what sort of concerns me most about the Supreme Court and the future of our rights, is that they embody that pride. They,
Mm.
in many cases, have grown up in a time where they understand that their rights are no different from a straight person's. Now, not so much in the queer, in the trans community, in
Yes.
in the, I think, gay and lesbian community more so. Um, I think that trans people are under attack in a way that is also terrifying. But the young people that I meet now that are gay seem to just understand it as a natural part of their identity, that they were born that way, that that's who they've always been. There isn't the shame that I felt. There isn't the sense of being a misfit or an other. And that's glorious. It's
Yeah.
breathtakingly glorious to experience that. I remember when I started telling people, it was a very big deal to me. I was still suffering from my own inner homophobia quite a bit and was afraid that people would judge me or think less of me. That said more about who I felt, how I felt about myself than the people that I was telling. But I remember telling my cousin's daughter, and my cousin who snuck us into the parade. Her daughter at the time was in her teens, and it was like a big moment for me. I'm telling somebody that I'm gay, and so I said, Maya, I just want to let I'm in a new relationship and it's with a woman. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that's all I get.
Not a
Like,
not a big deal
it's
for
great.
her.
It's great. And I'm like,
And the sky is blue.
right. She's like, everybody I know is gay. Sorry. It's like,
Right,
okay,
right.
fair enough. And the fluidity
Yeah.
that this generation has, not only the fluidity, but the tolerance and the acceptance and the sort of defense that they feel for each other is something that I am empowered by and so thrilled to see. Now we just have to get the rest of the world to see it and feel it too.
Yeah. I felt like it was very ironic, this Pride Month celebration, when we talk about, showing up for the community and showing up for trans people, especially trans people of color and queer people of color. Um, and in the backdrop and in the background are all of these anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ legislation laws.
Yeah.
How are brands expected to really show up in this moment for Pride? I personally feel like we're not having enough conversations about what brands can do to lobby against these laws and really take a stance. Instead, it feels to me like we're still in this moment of rainbow capitalism, performance pride, where, for me, just rainbow in your logo is just not cutting it
Mm-mm,
anymore. It's
no.
it's not the way to do it. And we really need brands and we need voices to take a stance and say, money talks ultimately.
Yep.
We all know that. This is all driven by capitalism. So what should brands be doing right now in this moment to help support the community?
Well, they should only be donating to campaigns whose candidates are pro LGBTQ rights. Period. The end. I mean,
Absolutely.
we are now in a situation where I can legitimately tell you that the system is rigged. The system is rigged because where corporations in the past could had a limit in terms of how much they could contribute to a campaign, to any candidate's campaign, that's now changed. That's only in the last couple of years that that has changed, and corporations now have an unlimited amount of money that they could support any candidate they wish. And so if corporations are not supporting candidates that are pro LGBTQ rights, pro reproductive freedom, then they shouldn't be getting any money from any corporation. And if any consumer is supporting any corporation that is giving money to any organization that is anti LGBTQ, anti reproductive freedom, anti marriage equality, they shouldn't be buying one single thing from that corporation. Consumers have a lot of power now because they can only purchase products from companies that they do believe in. And it's very easy to find out now who supports our rights and who don't. And we must boycott those companies. And in that way, the system could potentially be rigged in our favor. And I was very, very, very concerned when corporations were allowed to start providing any amount of money that they want to any candidate that they want. But now, if we hold them accountable, we can hold those corporations to a much higher power.
Absolutely. And, it goes so far beyond just creating the Pride merch and marching in the Pride
I
and
don't
the
know.
Pride parade.
That's table stakes.
That was exactly, that's just the bottom. The bar is on the floor at that
Yeah,
point. So it really is on brands taking an active stance. And, the collective capital of the LGBTQ community is important to these brands. That's why they do
absolutely.
these things, right? They're we know that they're concerned about a bottom line, while on the surface the marketing is telling you that we're really concerned about you. And this is so common, not just in brands, but also in companies, right? During our report, over 70% of LGBTQ persons in design reported experiencing some kind of discrimination in the workplace, whether this is spanning from like small microaggressions, such as just wrong pronouns, dead naming someone, all the way up to hearing homophobic comments being made in groups at work, even having to point out design decisions that exclude the queer community. What does the future of a truly queer inclusive design industry look like? And how can we begin to get there?
Well, we need to be making sure that we push ourselves into positions of power. And that might make some people uncomfortable. It might make the person that needs to rise to that occasion uncomfortable because they might be afraid of taking power or they may be shy or introverted. But we as a community have to make sure that people that represent our values are in positions of power. And so that means doing as much work as we can in cities and towns and states that need that support to get people out to vote for people that are queer, to make sure that people that are queer are representing us. That's the part that I think is most urgent now. I think that California, New York are probably safe. What can the people that are living in the safe places do for people that aren't? And so we need to get out and make sure that people are voting for people that are representing our needs. Because though there might be 8 million people in New York and however many million people in California, we still only get two senators in the same way that North Dakota and South Dakota and Wyoming and Montana and every other red state in this country are also getting. And so
Yes.
we have to make sure that our needs are represented in politics, from a federal politics point of view, as well as the politics in our corporations.
Absolutely. It goes so much further than just the design industry. It really goes into every aspect of our society, of our systems. We know that the systems were built and designed just the way they are, and they're working perfectly as they want them to. And it's up to us to really break through these systems and make a change. And you're right in the way that we need to rise up our voices. Oftentimes we see the corporations trying to, have queer people feel like they need to tone down or they need to change who they are to be able to rise to these occasions. Have you ever felt in your experience as a queer woman that you had to change who you are to be this voice?
Well, I came out when I was 50 years old. And at that point, I had already gotten quite a lot of power in the corporation that I worked in, which was a design
Mm-hmm.
consultancy, which was owned by Omnicom, which is one of the large publicly traded holding companies. I was more worried at that time about my more conservative clients somehow thinking less of me. Again, my own inner homophobia. I never experienced any of that from any of my clients at all.
Yeah.
What I came up having to contend with was a lot of misogyny, and that, oh, don't be so
Mm.
emotional, or oh, don't be so hysterical, or oh, and I was always having to fight for making as much money as my male counterparts. I was always having to make sure that I was representing the organization with as much power and position as my male counterparts. And I, for many, many, many years, worked for a man that gave me a lot of runway. So it wasn't so much him that I had to contend with, it was my counterparts that I had to contend with. Am I making as much money as the people that I'm equal to? When I found out that I wasn't, that was rough. And then I ultimately was able to get that. But there were times in my career where I had to go all in. And there were moments where it was really scary, where I was bluffing going all in because I didn't have the cards. But I knew if I didn't take that stance, that I wasn't going to get the jackpot, and had to take those moments with a lot of strength, because I knew if I didn't stand up for myself, nobody else was going to. But it was also terrifying because I knew if I called that bluff, that I might lose. Fortunately, I never did.
Mm.
But there were moments. I remember when I actually finally said to the CEO of the organization, "Well, if I don't get shares, I'm going to leave."
Mm.
And I was going to have to leave if I didn't get shares.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I couldn't be
Then
like,
you're
"Oh,
like,
sorry,
oh shit.
oopsies," just joking. I wasn't going to say that. But
Right.
then I did. I did get them, and I got them because I earned them and I deserved them. But, one of the things that I can say to you, and this is both as a woman and as a person in the LGBTQ community, is that other than Steve Heller, no one's just ever given anything to me. No one's ever said, "Here, Debbie, we
Mm.
would like you to do this." It was always, "I want this, I'm going to go after it. I want to do that, I'm going to go after this. I want this, I need to figure out how to find it." Steve Heller was the only one that ever said, "Oh, would you like this book deal?" Or, "Oh, would you like to co-chair this branding program with me?" And that's one person in a life that
Yeah.
has done that for me, and that's because of his courage and his generosity and his belief in the people around him. So, as terrifying as it might feel, my recommendation is to anybody that wants something is to work really, really hard, and if you're not getting the opportunities, then ask for them. The worst that could happen is that people will
Mm.
say no, and it might not be no forever, it might be no for now. But then there are other people that might be like, "Awesome, here you go."
Yes, yes, that's amazing. That brings me to the final question that I want to ask you, a little bit related to really how allies can show up for each other. One of the things that I observed is you often speak out about times when you're with Roxanne and you may be facing moments of discrimination, either towards Roxanne's race or towards the LGBT relationship in general. what do allies need to be doing to really show up for queer people of color and make sure that we're supporting them to either open doors or give them those opportunities, or really make sure that we're helping to elevate them more than the people who have those opportunities laid out for them on a silver platter?
Well, I think we have to call out the injustices. It makes Roxanne so uncomfortable, but I do that regularly. For example, whenever we travel, there is not a ticket agent, a hotel concierge, a flight attendant. There is not one person in a position where they're evaluating us that doesn't know who we are, that doesn't think we're together, that thinks that we're together. They're always like, oh, you two together? And now, Bex, I just say, we're married. And it's kind of annoying and kind of snarky, but I'm so tired of being asked that question, because in all the years that I've ever traveled with, when I was living a straight world in a straight life, where when I was with a person who was my significant other, anybody ever said, ever, are you together? They just assumed we were together. Nobody assumes that Roxanne and I are together. So now I say we're married. If somebody is dismissive of her, I call it out. If somebody is discriminatory towards her, I call it out. And I make her uncomfortable sometimes with doing that, but I can't sit by and watch or participate or condone micro or macro aggressions or outright prejudice and discrimination. And so I have really had to have really difficult conversations with people to get them to see their own conscious or unconscious bias. And I think that we have to do that
Wow,
for each
that
other.
is.
We have to do that for each other.
We have to. I completely agree. It's mandatory at this point that we call out those
Yeah.
systems of
Any
injustices.
person that has
Um,
any privilege at all is required now, from my point of view, to use that privilege to wake other people up to what they're doing that is hurting others.
Absolutely. Wow, what a powerful set of topics we touched on today, Debbie. I'm so grateful that we had this conversation. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for your contributions to the industry. And thank you for reminding us that while, many may feel like the fight is over, we are still
Mm,
far from
far
over,
from
but
over.
we've come a long way and we have a longer way to go.
Yeah, we've come a long
So,
way. We have a long way to go, but we've had some setbacks. I'm concerned about the potential continued setbacks, and therefore we can't rest. We can't sit on our laurels. We have to keep fighting for the justice that we deserve a big, big part of humanity.
yes, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much,
My
Debbie. It's been
pleasure.
an honor to have
It's been an
you.
honor to be
And I
here.
hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.